Welcome back to the Deeper Pulse and the Culture series. A couple of weeks ago, I relaunched this ongoing exploration of what puts the cult in culture with a couple of back-to-back solo episodes. So if you missed those, be sure to circle back. There's lots in there. But this week, I'm back with a guest, and I can't wait to share our conversation with you. So let's get to it. So far in this culture series, you've heard me talk an awful lot about wellness culture in particular. I've shared loads of personal stories to illustrate the impact that cult dynamics have had on my own personal sense of agency in a variety of wellness arenas. And in last week's episode, I spoke about a number of things, including how the wellness industry so often blurs the line between self-care and self-perfection, leading so many of us to obsess about our bodies and our beings, holding ourselves to high-minded standards that are built on the foundation of oppression and supremacist ideals. Personal development has become a multi-billion-dollar industry, one that reinforces biases and preys upon our social insecurities, creating hierarchies in terms of physical, spiritual, and social advancement. And in many cases, in addition to multi-level courses and high-demand, high-dollar trainings, products are being sold. Consumerism itself is a cult ideology built upon scarcity and the false premise that our sense of dignity and purpose in life is somehow inextricably related to how we look, what we own, and what we are willing to invest in an effort to better ourselves. Enter the world of multi-level marketing. MLMs have been a mainstay of wellness culture for decades, with ever-expanding armies of distributors who peddle skincare lines, vitamins and supplements, essential oils, health and wellness beverages, clothing lines. If you can name it, it's probably being sold through an MLM. And some of you might be saying, so what? Welcome to capitalism. Why is it that everyone's always going on and on about MLMs? Because, in one word, manipulation. MLMs are culty for all of the usual reasons. Love bombing, preying on vulnerability, coercive sales strategies, lack of financial transparency, chronic gaslighting of members, a closed-loop belief system. I could go on and on. But additionally, and practically speaking, the entire premise of the so-called business structure is faulty. Because in an MLM, it's not really the product that's being sold, it's membership. Buy-in to a business model that exploits people for profit. It's much easier to understand if we take a step back. I want to define two closely related terms because they're thrown around a lot when it comes to discussions about what is problematic about MLM. The first is known as a Ponzi scheme. A Ponzi scheme, by definition, is a fraudulent investment scam where people are conned into investing in a non-existent business enterprise, where existing investors are paid with funds from new investors. It's basically a grand fustercluck of endless recruitment based on a false promise of financial returns down the road. The entire house of cards requires continual recruitment of new investors, with those at the tippy top rolling in the dough. That is until the deck eventually folds in on itself. Pyramid schemes are similar yet different because they offer the illusion of agency. Investors are offered an opportunity to generate income by becoming a recruiter themselves. Theoretically, the more people they recruit, the more money everyone will make. Those at the top make the most money, so it encourages new investors to keep building out the bottom. All of this despite the fact that, once again, there is no actual product or service being sold. Both Ponzi and pyramid schemes have been outlawed for this reason and because they're considered fraudulent business practices. And so capitalistic power players decided to get creative. Enter the next iteration, known as multi-level marketing. MLMs are legal because, technically speaking, a product is being sold. But when you zoom in, the differences between a pyramid scheme and an MLM are a bit hard to parse out. Technically speaking, an MLM is considered legitimate when it uses sales reps to sell consumer products, and when those same sales reps are receiving compensation, primarily from the sale of products to outside consumers. Okay, sounds simple enough. But in reality, aside from a few at the top who were lucky enough to get in early, Commissions that are received by everyday sales reps are negligible at best, with many distributors taking a loss. And the vast majority of the product's so-called consumers are distributors themselves. Because, like in a pyramid scheme, the core function of an MLM isn't really about selling the product. It's about recruiting a larger and larger sales force, where members are continually building out the bottom of the pyramid, selling memberships to bottom-line investors. The product is the lure that gets people in. It's a love bomb distraction for the eventual bait and switch. It looks something like this. Hey girl, you want to come to my party this week? The invites are super exclusive and I'll be giving away all sorts of freebies. Yeah, I'm so glad you came too. Try this sample. You like it? Oh my God, your timing is so synchronistic. I have a limited number of spots left on my team, and if you join today, you'll get X, Y, and Z for even less money. Yeah, it requires a minimum monthly purchase, but if X number of your friends get in on the deal with you, you'll get a kickback on every purchase. Yeah, for real, check out my mentor. She's a stay-at-home mom who made 6 figures last quarter. I know, right? There's so much potential here. Meanwhile, said recruiter is doing and saying all she's been taught to do and say just to try and break even. She's all in on the promise she's selling you, that if she hustles hard enough, that she'll finally reach that upper echelon of financial freedom and eventually earn her place in the coveted inner circle. According to a study by the FTC, it's estimated that only the top 1% of MLM recruiters actually make money. 1%. And most of those are only making money because they got in early. An AARP study offers figures that are slightly less sobering, but still pretty disturbing, finding that 25% of people turn a profit, that roughly a quarter of MLMers break even, and around half end up losing money in the end. Aside from the fact that these statistics aren't at all reassuring, none of this takes into account the physical and emotional toll of all that hustling. Nor does it factor in the way that people are gaslit when things don't pan out. Not rising in the ranks? Clean up your vibes. Work harder. Shine brighter. No, it's not the business model that's the problem. It's you. I have a ton of compassion for people who get pulled into the culture of MLM, because the business practices prey upon universal human desires for agency, a sense of autonomy, and a meaning-driven sense of purpose. As with most culty cultures, hope is the thing that's being exploited, and the very thing that becomes weaponized when recruiters fail to meet their sales, or rather recruitment, quotas. They're shamed for their failings and invited to double down on the promise, and the capitalists climb to the tippy top. According to the Direct Selling Association, 6.2 million Americans are actively participating in MLMs, and the promise of an eventual payoff is the dangling carrot at the end of a very expensive stick. It keeps people in chronic sales mode, in some cases isolating them from friends and loved ones who grow tired of constantly being sold to. And there's a philosophy behind each one of these companies. Every MLM group has a culture and language all its own. In her book Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism, Amanda Montell devotes a good chunk of the book to MLMs. And as a language scholar, she has a unique perspective on the culture and its origins. In one passage, she writes, "Followers become conditioned to speak in the MLM's unnaturally cheerful register everywhere they go, with friends, family, strangers, and especially on social media. On Instagram and Facebook, you can clock a boss babe instantly, whether they explicitly mention a product or not. All it takes is that robotically chirpy syntax to give them away. It's as if someone is standing behind them as they type, cracking a symbolic whip to make sure they're always selling and recruiting, even if they're just posting about their dog. Like followers of an oppressive religion, MLM recruits wind up trapped in ritual time." She then continues with an insightful examination of how religion and sales have long been intertwined in American culture, and how MLM culture in particular is built upon the foundational tenets of prosperity gospel, toxic productivity dogma, and the myth of meritocracy. The closer I get to this stuff, the more I see how much it hits the culty bullseye every time, including how hard it can be to step away from MLM once you're in it. Not just because of all the money you've invested, but because of relationships built with team members. Like in a pyramid scheme, in an MLM, individual success is codependently bound to every individual who is above and beneath you on the ladder. There's so much here, and I've hardly even scratched the surface. If you want to learn more about MLMs and the many red flags, check out the show notes for some links. But before you do that, let's hear from someone who's spent time on the inside, who's worked in the world of multi-level marketing. This week's guest is a lovely human and a longtime friend who I just recently reunited with while doing this work. Jamie Smith was a small business owner, a health coach, and seasoned massage therapist when she signed on with dōTERRA, a multi-level marketing company known for its high-dollar essential oils. In today's episode, she shares about her experiences working for an MLM, what drew her in, why she eventually left, and why, a few years later, she began speaking publicly about her experiences. I loved having this chat, not only because Jamie is such a joy to talk to, not just because it gave me a really helpful peek into the culty culture of MLM, but because she and I ended up going so many unexpected places in this conversation. There's so much overlap in our stories that we began speaking candidly not only about MLM red flags, but about the coaching industry in general, about our shared history when it comes to magical thinking and indoctrination around not enoughness, and the role that the savior complex has played in both of our journeys with cult recovery. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Jamie Smith. Please note, the stories and opinions shared in this episode are based on personal experience and are not intended to malign any group, individual, or organization. Hi.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I was really looking forward to this. So I'm super excited that we are doing this.
Me too.
Yeah.
I love all these threads of people exploring this kind of material because it's just really up right now, right?
It is.
And
It really is.
yeah.
I just think it's so cool how our paths reconnected through this specific work. Let's just share a little bit about how we know each other. And my memory is not that great, so I'm not going to remember the timeline real well. But I know we connected perhaps after you moved did you move from California?
Yeah.
Am I remembering that right?
Right. I moved up here in 2007 and had been practicing massage therapy there. And then the licensure here was different. So I tried to find work in the spa industry, tried to kind of shift into operations and management. And I just could not find a job. And we did a little coaching together and I was just trying to get plugged in to Portland. So.
Mm-hmm. And I experienced your work at that time. I think we did a trade or something at one point. And I just remember I was so impressed with your skill level and how intuitive your approach was and how much knowledge you had. And it was also one of those, talk about the wellness industry, just a peek into, okay, this person who's really gifted and skilled, who has all this experience, just moved to a new state and she's sort of starting from scratch. Like she's going to, get licensed and do all these things. And
yeah.
You need to make ends meet, but you've got to jump through these hoops before you can even start. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was really challenging. It was right before the recession. So it was hard for lots of people to find work. And then I did eventually get my license in 2010. So it took me a little while to get back into it. But I really just could not quite make the transition that I was hoping to make. I really was trying to get out of doing massage therapy then, and I ended up doing it for quite a number of years longer. And I was really skilled at it and really enjoyed it and really wanted to do something else.
Right.
So
I get that.
So
I get that.
Kind of the segue into my time in MLM was creating a line of massage and body care oils. With my background, I'd already had lots of exposure to essential oils. And yeah, I thought that would be my little stay-at-home mom business.
Tell us a little bit about how did you learn about dōTERRA? How did you get involved? Clearly, it was connected to your work as a massage therapist. So tell us a little bit about how that looked.
I was producing my product and I was using a local company called Mountain Rose Herbs out of Eugene. And I had a friend who was also a neighbor. We kind of compared oils and she was a dōTERRA rep. And I looked at their inventory and I was like, well, they don't have a lot of the oils that I'm using. And it just sort of like was not on my radar. It didn't land for me at all. And she left me with a sample that was sort of apropos of nothing. So I didn't really know what to do with it. And it sat there for a long time. And then somehow a year or two later, we were on a walk together, and the details are real fuzzy, but it was basically an income claim pitch, opportunity pitch. Our upline in Portland is making X amount of money. It was 15,000 or something like that. Wouldn't you like to make that too? And I was just like, of course. Like, who wouldn't? And by that time, I had been producing my product long enough to realize the challenges that I was having with it. And I wasn't selling it fast enough. So all the carrier oils would go rancid before I could sell them. So it was a real problem. So having a company that, held the inventory and shipped directly for you seemed like a plus. And I had already been connected with Young Living in the past, but I never did anything with their business opportunity. I didn't even know about it. So, in my mind, I was like, oh, I already know how to sell essential oils. I can sell essential oils. I'll just do it through dōTERRA rather than my own product line. But I really did not have a grasp on what multi-level marketing was, how it operated, or what would be asked of me. I never saw a compensation plan. I never saw an income disclosure statement before I joined. I really didn't even question the pay-to-play model, which is a 100 PV or $100 basically minimum purchase requirement in order to qualify for commissions, which is pretty sketchy when you think about it. So, the questions I had were around the quality of the oils, and I got the whole pitch about CPTG, which is their own internal certification that they said was beyond organic. And I had some questions about like how Young Living compared to dōTERRA. And then I kind of just like rolled with it. And, some of the terms that we're learning through this learning process, one of them being cognitive dissonance. I think I felt that honestly from the very beginning, but I think I was also in a vulnerable position. I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. My partner, his work was not unreliable, but, kind of on and off. I also, was experiencing postpartum depression, and my dad had died, and I was experiencing complicated grief and like all these things, right? I was a really like perfect target in an industry that creates people who hold that dual role of being like a perpetrator and a victim at the same time. So she pitched it to me and I was like, yes, that sounds great.
Right. Yeah.
And one of the first training videos that I was sent was all about belief. And I thought it was going to be business operations or something along those lines or product education. But from the beginning, there was a lot of indoctrination about just kind of suspending critical thinking and going straight to belief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fascinating and troubling at the same time how much overlap there is between, some people might say like, oh, this is a podcast on MLMs. Like, what does this have to do with X, Y, and Z? And it's these mechanisms of recruitment and love bombing and recreating thought patterns through these belief systems and sacred science and all that. They're so similar, whether it's an abusive relationship, an MLM, or, wellness cult. So I think it would really help the listeners if you could describe for us what is an MLM, how does it function, and what defines it as an MLM.
So MLM stands for multi-level marketing. It has lots of other euphemisms like network marketing or direct sales or relationship marketing. Sometimes people call it affiliate marketing, which it's not. And it's a person-to-person sales model where people, sometimes they're just customers or sometimes they're distributors, just sort of by default. So they all operate slightly differently in the details of it, but essentially it's a pyramid, right? And what makes it legal is that there's a product being sold. But, what becomes clear when you really look at it is that the customers are really within that model. The distributors are the customers. It's essentially a pyramid scheme. You're just selling a product. So,
And generally, it's like kind of absurd, the statistic of like who's making the money.
yeah,
Up
the
with the question.
statistics are terrible. It's like 97 to 99% failure rate, meaning people are not making money. They're maybe breaking even or likely losing money. And those studies are through the FTC. And I think there was one through AARP as well. There are lots of resources out there about that. So, I mean, when you look at the income disclosure statements, it's pretty clear that there's that top 0.3% or like whatever that top percent is, it's very, very small. And then it trickles down. And so the people kind of at my level who were just starting, the message is, it doesn't matter when you get in. If you do the work, you're going to succeed, right? The only people who fail are the ones who quit. If I can do this, you can do this, right? But it sort of denies the inherent structure of it. So, I was one of those people. I was very compliant. I followed all the training systems. I did the work. I was really good at enrolling customers because of my background. I was also a certified health coach, and that was another offering I tried to integrate into my massage practice. So yeah, I thought I could essentially give people that coaching for free on the front end and get paid the residual income on the back end. But there's a ton of recruiting involved and getting people to also do the business. And I just struggled with that. I didn't have my own life-changing story. They're, always really big on sharing your life-changing story to hook people. And I just didn't have that experience, and I wasn't going to make one up. I had little ones that I'd share, but there was only so much that I felt like I could embellish that or make a big deal about it.
Or circle it back to the product specifically, which is what they're wanting you to do, right? And there's all
Yeah. And you can make all kinds of correlations, but it's like, who knows if it's the product. I mean, looking back, and it has been a while now, I was quite ill during my time with dōTERRA. I was having lots of infections and EBV, and, I was not well. So it certainly didn't cure me.
Not exactly the testimonial they're hoping that you'll share.
Yeah.
Well, and is it such that you, and maybe my ignorance is going to serve the listener because I'm going to ask questions that maybe seem obvious to somebody who's been involved. But so your buy-in is basically that you are supposed to buy a certain amount of product and you're buying it wholesale and then you're reselling it. Is that part of it? Or no, are you just recruiting other wholesalers?
A little bit of both. I mean, I think there may be a legal requirement to offer retail because one of the things that differentiates a pyramid scheme from a multi-level marketing or network marketing company is the focus on recruitment. So you can sell retail. And when I briefly had a public office space, we had some on the shelves. But when we taught our classes, right, and other MLMs are called parties, ours were classes. They were educational. Part of our script was you can buy retail, but friends don't let friends buy retail. And then you'd get them a wholesale membership. And I cannot tell you how convoluted and complicated it was to explain the membership benefits over and over and over. And what I found over time was the bulk of my time was not health coaching people or supporting people with their wellness. It was explaining these rules over and over because they were complicated, which is kind of a theme that you see in multi-level marketing that, I'm not sure quite what happens, that at some point, maybe you just again, kind of lean into belief and not so much on the facts because it's hard to understand. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, it did. And it makes me think of one of the traits of charismatic leader, which, we can think of in terms of charismatic authority, like maybe an organization in and of itself, is this ability to create word salad.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of information coming at you,
right?
And it all sounds really shiny and cool and and like, oh, that sounds good. But if you were to logically analyze it, it doesn't quite fit together. And I think creating that confusion, and also I think in self-help commerce in general, there's this sense of hustle. Like if you can get people into this anxious state of hustle, they're not going to pay as much attention to the detail because they just can't. They don't have the bandwidth.
Yeah.
And so they're confusing you with the language and simultaneously creating an urgency. Like you got to recruit more, you got to get more people on board. And are they telling you that there's some big incentive to you? That if you get more people under you, that's how you're going to make money, right? That's the...
Oh, absolutely. That's the only way to
Right.
make money is to build a huge team. And looking back, when our upline would show us pictures from their first convention, and it was these small banquet tables, and it was very, very small, it didn't dawn on me until recently-ish that they just got in really, really early, and that actually does matter. And you do see people kind of rank up perhaps organically, but there's a lot of placement happening. There's a lot of stacking happening where people put people underneath other people. I did that on my team because I didn't have any other builders. So I enrolled everybody, placed everybody. And then when it would fall apart, I'd do it all over again. It was a mess. It was just, a lot of management of the tree or the pyramid, if you will.
Was there any point in time at which you were actually making money working with dōTERRA, or was it always a hustle without any reward?
Yes and yes. You do see income claims with multi-level marketing companies a lot. Sometimes it's like, do you just want to make an extra $100 or $200 a month? Sometimes income claims are much bigger. On the website for our team, they pitched it as free healthcare, right? That dōTERRA can essentially replace your healthcare. So it's a health claim and an income claim in one, which, by the way, those are reportable to the FTC. So convoluted. The way that they tier your participation is like you earn enough just to get your oils paid for. So, you're spending at least $100, but maybe you make $100. In order to do that, you have to promote the oils, teach classes, do all these things, probably buy extra product for samples, buy business material. So even if you're just sharing and not trying to build a business, you still have to do quite a bit to kind of break even.
Mm-hmm.
So, I took a loss on my taxes the 4 years that I participated, but I also sort of had dōTERRA under my umbrella of my actual business. I honestly never really parsed out those numbers specifically.
Sure.
But even if I made $200, I was probably spending at least $150 of that just on my personal order. And I'm sure I was spending at least another $50 on a booth or table fee, on all the things, right? Like there are so many expenses that are not accounted for when they tell you how simple it is to do this.
So we understand the hook and how people come in. What do you think? Is it like a sunk cost fallacy thing? Like, what do you think keeps people in? Is it, they've invested so much already and that's kind of what keeps them going at it? Like, what's your feel of why people stick it out and continue to hustle even when it's not really showing up in the numbers?
Yeah. Well, I put this much into it, I might as well keep going. I met with my upline every week, who was incredibly encouraging. I received a lot of love bombing and friendship, like she was a lovely person. Lots of really lovely people on our team. I'm sure you probably know some of these people, it's like
potentially. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think when you're in an environment where you keep hearing, like I mentioned earlier, the messages, if I can do this, you can do this. Mm-hmm. The only people who fail are the ones who quit. They even sort of do this thing where they like preemptively answer your questions, right? Like, oh yeah, we know multi-level has a bad name, but we're different because, right? Or they were really a big fan of somehow comparing your time investment and your financial investment as an actual investment. So they'd compare, like, if you did dōTERRA for 5 or 10 years And if you just ranked up one rank every year to become a millionaire, you'd have to put this much money into your invest. So like all these comparisons that are like, you would never really think to make,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah. Right. Right.
Yeah.
It's really a misrepresentation the whole time. And how are you to know that? You only know what you know.
Yeah.
You've been sold a vision that isn't necessarily viable.
Yeah. I mean, it's tricky because on the one hand, and maybe this is dōTERRA wide, or maybe it was just on our team, but we were very education focused. And so we learned a lot about the products. We had physicians on our team that would teach classes, you know, so there was a lot of kind of authority built into it that seemed validating to me. So because there was that focus on education, the idea was sort of get people to fall in love with the products. Eventually, they're going to love it so much, they're going to just naturally want to do the business. So we didn't have a focus per se on recruiting, but if you wanted to actually earn money, you absolutely had to recruit. And we did have business trainings on how to do that, but it really was you're sort of like going through this process with a customer of building a relationship and maybe eventually introducing the business. Maybe that kept me in it longer because it was a little bit more of a get rich slow message. So that felt more possible than any kind of get rich quick thing, right?
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
I can tell you though, I got extremely relationship out. Like I could only take so many people to coffee and give out so many samples and talk to so many strangers. It was insane. You know, you can only get out of your comfort zone so much before you realize that it's just going against all of your natural instincts.
Yes.
And then fast forward to 4 years down the road, I remember talking to my husband so many times, should I keep doing this? This isn't working. I'm going to try it this way. I'm going to try it this way. Like switching up my approach over and over again. But essentially I could really just start to see kind of the lies really clearly, you know, that the time freedom pitch, I could just see that my uplines, it was their whole life.
Right.
That didn't look like time freedom to me.
Right.
Know? And something that happens early on is, you know, getting you to dream big. And I did have some big dreams, and I thought that dōTERRA could sort of like finance that in the background. But then what I really saw was that it really does become your whole world.
That's a big ding, ding, ding for me in terms of overlap with the experience that I had in the New Age wellness cultures that I was in. And that piece that I believe it was Dr. Yanula, which was the first person I heard say it, like people often want to know what makes a person susceptible. And there's not really a great answer to that. Many times organizations are recruiting people who are super high functioning, super smart, don't necessarily have trauma in the background, like all the things that people want to default to in terms of assumptions. Sure. That's not usually the case. And the one thing that seems to really rise up is this sense of idealism. And if you can plug into somebody's vision and a sense of purpose, and if you can really get people to be super oriented toward a shared vision, then you can sign them up for your mission. And then what I also found was that in these organizations, it wasn't really about the mission. It was about the company. It was about feeding that top line, I guess, as you would call it in an MLM. You know, the same sort of structures are built in hierarchically in the organizations that I was in. It just wasn't about wholesale products. And yet the hierarchy is still there. And there's lots of, if you can get people to sign on for the vision and for the ideal that you're all working toward, the educational component, like that was the same in the mind body fitness company that I was in. We're educating people. We're opening people's eyes. We're helping them to find wellness in their lives, body, mind, and spirit. If you can get people on board for that, the sacrifices that people will make, myself, I should speak for myself, the sacrifices that I would make and the things that I would turn a blind eye to. She's like, well, you know, but we're changing people's lives. I mean, that was like the buzzword, right? We're changing people's lives. And
oh, yeah.
I mean, there's so much overlap there in terms of the culture that creates this dynamic. And this is where I think the wellness piece is really important to look at. It's like, what is this larger umbrella that we're both under? And maybe in some ways they're still kind of pulling ourselves out of, like, what is wellness really? And how has it become this commercialized culture where this sort of mechanism is operating? A lot of times where
it seems like it's about one thing, the vision, the wellness, the holistic health. And yet when you really look at it, it's about products and sales and money.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, dōTERRA as a company really pushes the message of service and being mission driven, empowerment, personal empowerment, empowerment for your families, serving others. And, you know, in the broader umbrella of wellness, part of that is pointing out the flaws within the medical establishments and the healthcare systems, which are real, but, you know, really get leveraged and manipulated in these environments and communities and demonized, really. You know, they're really pitted against one another. So, yeah, I mean, I don't quite know how to respond. It's just, I mean, I feel like MLMs are capitalism on steroids, which feels really ironic when, you know, it's all about your why and your mission and your service. And, you know, it's just really hard to parse out, what is this really? It's the answer to everything. It's going to answer your financial problems, your health problems, your lack of community. Like, it answers everything.
Yeah, that's the big red flag, right? Is, you know, that's one of the takeaways, I think, from all of this for me, and definitely from this conversation, and seeing how a seemingly very different experience is so similar in so many ways. People often want to know, like, how do I know if I'm getting involved in something that's sort of culty, that's got a little bit of that? And that's one of the red flags big time, is what is it promising you? And does it sound too good to be true? Because you know what? Then it probably is. And it's probably a smokescreen for something else that's going on behind the scenes. It's distracting you from what's really happening. And that ability to examine, I think, often for so many of us is like a hindsight thing. This concept of moral injury is something that's really spoken to me in a deep way. It really resonated with me the first time I read about moral injury, and this, when our values are actually used against us in a way, when our values are hijacked and we think we're working toward one thing, and we spend all this energy, and then we learn that it really wasn't ever really about that. It's a deep wound. It's very painful.
Oh,
you resonate with that?
Absolutely. I mean, what's coming up for me when you talk about that is being in one of our training seminars. It was kind of more of a day-long thing, which is another aspect of, like, you're putting a lot of unpaid time into the trainings and those sort of things. So this one was really about connecting to your why, and your why should make you cry. So there was a lot of like emotional manipulation.
Your why should make you cry. Wow.
But, you know, at the time I was very passionate about the potential of transforming the healthcare system to be more equitable and holistic, you know, allopathic and naturopath, you know, like all of it. And I think I shed a few tears, you know, like they got
oh yeah, girl, I know it.
You know, but also sort of that manipulation of your ability to dream and vision and think about your future. I feel like that is a moral injury I'm still recovering from. Like, is it safe to dream again?
Yes.
Is it safe to want more? Like, how much more should I actually want? What's reasonable? All of that still feels really skewed.
I love that you named that. I really do. I know that I'm not going to be alone in being able to relate to that. And it really, what the therapist that I've been working with for the last few months has really helped me to understand is this, the way that it becomes like a spiritual wound, even if the organization that you're engaging with has nothing to do with spirituality, the wound of disconnection from self. What you described for me, the way that shows up is like an inability to trust myself. To say, okay, I made these choices before based on the information I had available, and I kind of got myself into a pickle, and then oops, I did it again. And then oops, I did it again. It's happened more than once for me.
Oh, sure. Me too.
Yeah. So the remnants of that, of just like, can I even trust my own instincts? Can I trust when I'm interested in something that I can move toward it? It's like we want to keep our hearts open, and yet there's this protective shell that kind of gets created. And yeah, just navigating that as part of the healing, I think, is one of the hardest things for me. Definitely.
Yeah. There is perhaps a human tendency to trust until you've been burned enough times. You kind of need to, unfortunately, learn the hard way. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's probably something to that. And it might have been when I first started listening to cult podcasts and whatnot. Maybe it's around NXIVM, I can't remember. But one of the survivors was talking about dealing with the shame and the embarrassment internally around being duped, having been sort of conned or misled and having fallen for it. And part of what was hard about leaving was actually saying, well, if I leave, then I have to admit this to myself.
Yeah.
That I was duped. And I wish I could remember who these folks were, but there was a discussion, and one of the people being interviewed said, well, one of the ways we can forgive ourselves is to understand that when we go into a situation, it's not that we're naive and so innocent and what's wrong with us. It's really, if you don't have the capacity to think diabolically, or if it's not in your wheelhouse to really think about how these manipulations might occur, of course, it's not going to occur to you to look for them. And then when the person, let's say an abusive partner, for example, we see this a lot in abusive relationships. When the abusive partner does something like gaslighting or something like really manipulative, why is that person given a benefit of the doubt? Well, often it's not because the person giving the benefit of the doubt is so naive. It's because, like, even to conceive of that level of manipulation, it's just so far outside of the realm of possibility that we are just like, oh, well, there must be a simpler explanation.
Yeah.
And so we just justify all these little things. As like you said, from the very beginning, you had the cognitive dissonance. Like the alarm was going off the whole time. Same for me. The alarm's going off inside. Something's off. Something's not right here. And then you're love bombed and all this stuff is happening. And of course, the default is to trust because you're being told something. Why would you assume that people are just lying to your face?
Right.
And I think, yeah. And they're lovely people. And the thing is that this is what's so, I think, painful. And I know that I played a role in that. I know that I recruited and manipulated people without realizing it. And I think the key is to understand that, there's always extreme examples, which we hear of when we talk about cult dynamics. It's always about the malignant narcissist doing all these awful, awful things. And then it's like, well, what's happening underneath that? Genuine people who've bought into the belief system and the indoctrination, and they really do actually have good intentions.
Right.
And they're saying and doing all the things that are manipulative, not even realizing what they're doing. So it's that self-forgiveness. I think part of it is we get angry at everyone around us, but really we're sort of mad at ourselves for falling for it. And also we don't know what to do with the fact that they probably didn't mean to hurt us, but they did.
Yeah. And I think part of recovery is, that self-forgiveness and like letting go of shame and realizing that you didn't fail. It's the system set up to fail.
Yes.
Like it's built in. So I can sit here now, 4 years later, finally, because it took me a really long time to kind of even start looking at it critically. They were really brilliant and intentionally manipulative, saying, if you quit on a good day, which means that whoever quits just sinks into the shadows and never says anything, not like, oh, I had a bad experience, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I continued to, I didn't really moderate my Facebook group anymore, but I said, hope you continue to enjoy the oils. And here's my upline for support and all the things, right? Still supporting the company, still placing my own orders for a good year or two after, until I began finally hearing this information about the dark side of MLM and that. So I think it can just take a while to unravel all of that. It certainly did for me.
Yeah. Same. Oh yeah. Big time. So you started an Instagram page. There's just a lot of information on there and you post videos every so often. And what inspired you to step into the spotlight in that way and to start speaking out?
I think at that point I had listened to a few kind of things that had an impact on me. I listened to the podcast called The Dream. That was really informative, just about sort of like what is multi-level marketing and the history of it and how it operates. So I recommend that to anybody.
We'll link to that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then I think it was a year and a half or 2 years later, there was a Netflix series called Unwell. And the first episode was on essential oils. And that, for whatever reason, the timing of it just kind of clicked for me. And I was like, this is gross. And, I could just kind of see a different layer of it. And then it was around that time. I don't know if I had seen Leah Remini's Scientology aftermath before or after that, but I was starting to come across this content more and more, and then started more intentionally seeking out anti-MLM content on YouTube primarily. There's some great content creators there. And I felt like I was getting an education, because they really discourage you from looking at any of this material.
Yeah.
They really discourage, I can't quite remember how they talked about it, but it's like we felt kind of insulated from it.
Yeah. And I just want to highlight this for all the listeners out there who are really wanting to learn about these dynamics, that one of the other things to pay attention to when you're asking yourself, like, is the organization I'm getting involved in sort of culty, is, are they maybe not overtly, but in many ways discouraging you seeking other input, information? They're discouraging from being exposed, and you're in this sort of insular type environment. All the answers are here, which goes back to that first red flag, right? It's like all the answers are here. So why would you go there?
Right. We're going to answer your question before you even have them. So why would you need to look outside?
Exactly.
I think, at the very, very beginning, and this is something that a bunch of us promoted over the spring, was the FTC was collecting comments for what they call the opportunity rule that MLMs were excluded from, because the Direct Sales Association lobbied so hard to be excluded from this rule that applies to things like franchises and other business models where, when you're being offered an opportunity, you have to be given certain information. So MLMs, for example, you would be given the income disclosure statement, which I never saw until I was out, that shows those statistics, right, of failure and success. And there would be like a little waiting period, maybe 7 days or something like that. So there's not this FOMO or sense of urgency, or like, I've only got 2 spots on my team, which is a total lie. There's infinite spots. Anything that's like, there's this deal, there's this incentive, join now. Any of that, I would now consider a huge red flag.
Yes.
And I would warn anybody to ask for those 2 things at least: time to think about it and time to see the income disclosure at the very least.
Yes. That red flag of not having economic transparency, big one, so big. And I love that you really highlighted this piece around that urgency. And you and I've talked about this privately, but just to share with the listeners, this is really why I stepped away in a big way from the coaching industry. When I kind of went all in with my coaching, I was buying into the Boss Girl business programs, and I went through Marie Forleo's B School in 2012, and I was just super involved in all that. And I did all the things, and I did make some money, and I was really conflicted about the money that I made. And I'm sure most of the listeners, you've been on a sales page and you're just scrolling, and the price is like way down at the bottom, and it's telling you all the things that are going to happen, and there's testimonials peppered in, and it's really strategic, super strategic, because it works. And it creates psychologically, as the person's scrolling and they're reading through this, it creates that sense of urgency. There's usually a time crunch of some kind, or it used to be the time crunch was enough, but now it's all about freebie events. So I'm going to do this free webinar on Saturday. Sign up. There's only 4 spots available. In reality, the webinar is happening a lot, but you must sign up for it right away. And then you go through the webinar and you're given free content. So you're like, yeah, you're taking notes. You're like, oh my God, this is great. Like, my business is going to rock. And they're telling you all these sensationalized success stories. And then at the end comes the bait and switch. Here's the thing they're actually selling, and you need to act right now in order to get it.
Right. And only available at this event or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. We're genuinely creating a vulnerable state. We're tapping into their pain point. We're pushing on it. And then we're creating this sense of urgency, and then coercing them into taking action when they're in
a certain type of thinking when it would be much better for them to sleep on it, take a few days, think about if it makes sense for their budget and their family and yada, yada, yada. But that's how the structure was. I created the sales pages. I did all the things and I made some money. But the thing was, Jamie, like people were signing up for my programs and the only people who were really truly benefiting from them were the people who were working with me one-on-one as well.
Mm.
And a lot of that was because usually they don't need a coach and what a coach has to offer unless they need some accountability. There's no accountability built in. Like they buy a thing and then for the next 6 weeks on their own, based on some canned emails that I send out, they're supposed to go through this process of transformation, which is utter bullshit because we change through genuine connection and transformation happens slowly. It's not a quick fix. And so much of it, I felt so out of integrity. And the push to become like a online celebrity and like, I'm the expert, it just left a bad taste in my mouth. And I pulled back from all of it. And so many of my colleagues whom I love and respect, and I think have the best intentions in the world, are using these models. And I'm a little cringy and wary. And I have concern about if people are making the best choices because of that urgency. Because I know I totally took the bait. I was like, yeah, that sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
Sign me up, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had the same experience when I became a health coach and was taught those same formulas and also felt super cringy about it, which is one of the reasons I was vulnerable to a different opportunity that was in my wheelhouse. And I also took the bait on lots of those things myself, right? Like as a healer, as a helper, as somebody invested in my own healing and helping others, I took the bait on that stuff a lot. And then in dōTERRA too, it was like, oh, we found the best coach. We found the best new system. There was always a better new system. So you're always reinvesting in new business materials or a new program,
Well, that really points me towards something that you brought up when we were talking in preparation for this, about this general focus on needing fixing, right? That there's this insatiable hunger that the marketing gods tap into. This something's not enough. I don't have enough. I don't know enough. I haven't gone deep enough. Like whatever the thing is, there's this insatiable hunger. I know for myself, I had so many self-help books, all of the books,
all of the books,
all of the things, all of the processes. I did all the things and I would experience the benefits and feel a little progress. And then it was just like the hunger would come back just as strong. Like, what's the next thing that I don't know I need to learn? And there's people telling me all the time. I think we think of marketing in terms of like, oh, maybe it's Maybelline. And we also have those pressures in terms of body dysmorphia and how the media's fed that. But also internally, I think we don't always talk about like how we're also internally being preyed upon.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just our superficial self that needs cleaning up. It's our internal selves. Like there's something incomplete.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, as always in these conversations, because it's so layered going in 12 different directions, but with dōTERRA, it's very clearly like an entry point, pain point, like you have a headache or this or that.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be a financial pain point. You need to make more money. But then, like as you get more into it, I mean, it's not only just like the health protocols that by and large people in MLMs or dōTERRA specifically are not qualified to promote or teach or counsel people on.
Yeah.
Luckily I felt somewhat qualified having a certification, but still, that's questionable. So like then you're getting deeper in that way, like learning more and more protocols. But if you're trying to do the business specifically, which I'll just quickly name, like you're not a business owner if you're operating an MLM. If you're a consultant, if you're a distributor, you're not a business owner. You work for $1 billion corporation, so you're not cute. But, then it starts getting into mindset, belief training and like, why can't I find these other builders? Like I'm doing all the things. It must be a mental limitation that I'm having, or I'm just not in the right vibration to attract the right builders, that sort of thing. So I guess I'm just trying to contextualize this within
Yes.
dōTERRA and my own experience there, because I certainly experienced it elsewhere. But, it's like getting that mentorship every week to like look at these questions every week and try to sort it out, when that might have been lovely to have that support and that connection, but it still doesn't work in this framework, this business model. So yeah, I constantly felt broken, like I was doing it wrong, even though I was following the systems. But I suppose more big picture, or that bigger umbrella of wellness, was, really hooking into the natural solutions, quote unquote, that we offered. Just, I was so in alternative everything.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I'm glad you brought in the magical thinking piece to sort of see how the mechanics of it are working. It's like people get pulled in and become attached to an identity. Like you said, they're a business owner. It's like, wow, I have a business, like a sense of purpose and a sense of possibility, like we talked about, the vision. And then we have the identity, yet we have to live up to the identity. I have to prove that I'm a boss babe. I have to do this. And then when we're getting coached, because this is how our coaches have been coached, which was similar in the organization I was in, that was the trainers, the teachers, and the students, indoctrination's coming down from the top. So everyone's doing the same thing. Then you're continually told, well, if it's not working, then there's something else you need to be doing. There's something wrong with you. And it's not out there, it's inside. And so we end up in this system where we are trained to gaslight ourselves over and over and over again. Like, oh, it appears as though something isn't working on the outside, but it's just my vibration. It's my beliefs, my past trauma, like whatever it is. We're like beating ourselves up, right?
Right.
Yeah. And it's just
work that very likely is not going to work. I remember the first time that idea of, in multi-level marketing or any pyramid or Ponzi scheme, it's just about getting the next 3 people, because then those people are going to get the next 3 people, right? Like theoretically, you only have to find 3 people.
Right.
Theoretically, right? So when I was even struggling to find those people, and, law of attractioning my balls off, that, I remember kind of complaining to one of the trainers on our team. I'm like, not making any money, but I'm being the leader that I want to be. Like, I'm acting as if embodying a leadership position when I was nowhere near a leadership rank. That's a little bit of a sidebar, but I remember them saying, you just have to do it. Like, if you're not finding the builders, you just have to build your team. And I was like, okay, so not that easy, right? Like it was the first layer of the veil coming off, where, I was like, okay, so it's not just following these systems. It's not just getting myself in a magnetic position.
Yeah. I always thought that was real fascinating when I was really involved in the industry as a coach and as a teacher. And I would watch the folks who were really successful. And the folks who were really successful were often the ones who were saying the most about law of attraction and vibes and all this stuff. And then when I would get close to them, they were working their asses off. And also, some of them had privilege to invest in creating that business. That was something that I saw a lot, where people would be like, well, you just need to invest in this, this, and this. And I'd be like, yeah, I don't have 2 dimes to rub together. Like, what are you even talking about?
I want to be really transparent about something. Is after my dad died, I did receive an inheritance that I wasn't expecting, but I did have money to spend on this without it bankrupting me like it does other people. So I absolutely was able to leverage my privilege to participate, until I realized, that it actually didn't pencil out, and that spending those resources in that way was not a good idea.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I think it's really important. I mean, I certainly there's plenty of privileges I could speak to in terms of what I was able to do and why I was able to do it. And I think it's really key, since we are talking about MLMs in particular, like people do literally go bankrupt because they get involved in situations like this.
Oh, absolutely. They do. And I do think it takes a certain amount of privilege to even participate, because there is that pay to play model. It's like, you're not just a salesperson, you're your first customer.
Yeah.
So there's a minimum quota that you have to buy into, and then the products are already so inflated in terms of pricing that, it's challenging. I'm really not sure how it continues to be justified.
Yeah.
In this moment, there's a huge issue happening with Young Living. I haven't plugged in super deep. I happened to catch a live stream on YouTube yesterday, just totally spontaneously. I'll give you the link to it. You can post if you'd like. So they read the transcripts, and
the transcripts are from a hearing related to?
From a hearing against Gary Young. So when you look at like Young Living versus dōTERRA, Young Living has so many glaring red flags that one of the reasons, after learning about anti-MLM stuff, that I wanted to start connecting with people in the broader anti-MLM community. And I had the opportunity to share my story a few different times on YouTube channels and podcasts and stuff, is because dōTERRA doesn't seem to be one of the big companies that gets criticized. Young Living does a lot. And that's fine. And it's good that they're pretty much a sinking ship right now. And that's kind of a win for the anti-MLM community.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But just because dōTERRA doesn't have this incredibly problematic, charismatic leader, and just because they all left and, tried to really polish the turd is one way to say it, like dōTERRA looks good in a lot of ways. Like their marketing is good. Their messaging is good. They're not blatantly or explicitly religious. They're appealing, I think, in a lot of ways, especially compared to Young Living. But, for all the reasons that MLMs are bad, dōTERRA is also bad. They're still an MLM. They're still promoting a business model where tons of people fail. Very few people succeed. So my voice in the conversation is not necessarily as an educator, because I haven't read all the books, but, I just try to offer my insight as a former insider. That's kind of my role, I guess.
Sharing stories and experiences is key. As my former guest, Tracy Stamper, and I started this support group for people who have left the organization that we spoke about. And the power of people just being able to share their story and to hear, because people can listen to all kinds of educational stuff, but there's something about, hey, I walked in your shoes and this is what I thought it was. And this is how it felt. And this is when I was disenchanted. And there's such a relatability, and it's so key to have people like you out there just transparently going through this process of unpacking it all. And I just love that you're doing it. And you have it separate from your personal page. So I didn't even know you were doing it. It was really wild. I released this cult series and suddenly you wrote me a message and was like, hey girl. I'm like, what? It's pretty cool. And I loved, my favorite was your hashtag, dōTERRA. I just thought that was just the best thing ever. dōTERRA. It's so great. I was like, did you come up with this? So clever. I love me a play on words.
Yeah. It's fun.
And one of the things I wanted to highlight, though, was something that you said. I have it here in my notes when we were talking last time. We were talking about that hustle and that growth. And you said something about, instead of a growth mindset, I'm sort of interested in a rest mindset.
Yeah. Compost mindset.
I love that.
I'm really into rhythms and cycles. And when you're in coaching world and MLM world, it's just about growth. And so there's really no respect for light and dark, or ebb and flow, if you will.
Yes.
It's all about the next rank and what you just have to do to get there. And I have to believe now that the people at the top of our team even with their good intentions, know that this is not going to work for most people. And so asking people to hustle in that way, asking people to keep showing up, even acknowledging like they did, like, we know that, you know, the people at the bottom, we know that you guys are hustling the hardest, but it's going to pay off.
Right.
You know, it's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah, it does. It gets pretty icky. And the way that it incrementally happens so that a person gets to a point where they're saying these things, I'm speaking these untruths, like having never had any intention to do such a thing.
mm-hmm.
I mean, I definitely see that in the org and the way that it's interesting is I won't call it an MLM. And it's also interesting to me that it started with students worldwide and then teachers, this sort of team of teachers, and then trainers who are training the teachers. And then over the last few years, they've been continually adding trainers. So there's more and more and more and more trainers, but there's not the demand at the bottom. I don't know what it is, where they're sort of feeding the middle, and these folks are like working, a lot of them doing a lot of stuff for free, which happens a lot because of the mission, right? To like feed this downline, and the downline isn't building, like it's not there, which is really similar to what happens in an MLM, right? The demand is not there, and yet you're bringing all these people in. And so the only way to keep the organization alive viably financially is to keep recruiting more trainers, right? More teachers, more trainers, more teachers, more trainers, more teachers, more trainers.
Yep.
And it's not about the service anymore. It's about feeding that upline. And yeah, all that to say that growth mindset, I think folks don't even realize that trance is being cast on them, that that's even what they're feeding, until they get to the point where there is an urgency. And it's like, hey, I have to tell people what I have to tell them and what I've been told to tell them, because I have so much writing on this now.
Right.
And I see that a lot in the org, like folks who have been in for years and years and years and turning a blind eye to the dysfunction at the top, which is a whole other dynamic, and then seeing what's being created and not making really a living money. And this is where privilege really plays into it. A lot of folks, this is their side gig, yet they spend 70 hours a week on it. And they're not really making a living, but they're changing lives.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, I think there's also something about the savior complex, this idea that like we can't rest,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we have to
Yep.
save the world. We can't
Right.
rest. And it feeds these dynamics.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I know I have it now with anti-MLM, where like I see somebody in dōTERRA, please get out, you know, like I totally want to save people. And so, yeah, I mean, we talk about this a lot in the movement or community. People call it different things, want to call it different things. But how to not perpetuate the dynamics that we learned within MLM, you know, now that we're out, like how do we not continue that behavior?
Can you give me an example? That's really fascinating. I love that.
Well, I mean, the savior complex, I think, is one.
Uh-huh.
I've seen it come up with people, like, I guess, being kind of on fire for it and like being so passionate about it that they kind of reach out to other creators in inappropriate ways to try to make connections to, you know, boost their YouTube or whatever, things like that,
Right.
I'm honestly not that participatory in, but yeah, I guess those could be two examples. Just trying to stay mindful of it, right? Like putting boundaries in place where needed, being able to disagree with people respectfully, not all having to believe the same thing.
Yeah, that's a big one. And I even see that I want to name in myself, even as I'm moderating this group. And, you know, I want to say like the indoctrination that I experienced, part of it was the org. And for me, it was more of broader new age wellness indoctrination that occurred in a lot of different places. Yeah. So I'm still kind of weaning myself off of that and shifting my thinking in a lot of ways. And I'm in this group and I see it happening with people who are coming in as well, where we're sort of not wanting to repeat the same mistakes. And yet, for example, as I'm reading through people's posts, I feel that old impulse to make sure that people aren't being victims. Right? Like if they're having a moment and they just want to rant. And finally, express their anger at the injustice, their righteous outrage around the ways they were taken advantage of. And I see it. And fortunately, I'm awake enough that I check myself, but my impulse is to be like, oh, I need to shut that down.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like instead of just allowing people their humanity, for God's sakes, right?
Right.
They're just expressing themselves. Like, that's on me. That's my stuff. That's not theirs. And I have to check that cultic behavior of shaming.
Right. You guys are just being so negative. Yeah.
It's just tricky. It's such tricky stuff. And we have to check ourselves.
There's so much, I guess gatekeeping is one of the words that's used around, like what behavior is acceptable or not.
Yes.
So that comes up in the anti-MLM circles as well. What's okay to talk about and how to talk about it in certain ways. And, how that came up in dōTERRA. One example is, you were allowed to complain to your upline. You were not allowed to complain to your downline to perpetuate the appearance of it's all good.
So that was explicitly stated.
That was explicit, for sure. And I think I had enough of a real relationship with my upline that, she would be transparent about her struggles with me. So I feel like I got to see it both ways and not just within that prescribed model. She's still making way more money than me.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Is there anything in particular you would say to people? We've talked about sort of general red flags, but in terms of MLM specifically, like what should people pay attention to that you wish you had known to look out for?
I mean, honestly, just don't join an MLM. Like there's so many better options. Like I said earlier, if MLM is going to continue, and it will, and if these safeguards are going to get implemented, it's going to take years, so because it's not required, I would just say, if you are presented with something and you're curious enough to want to explore it, looking at the income disclosure, not just the dangling carrot of the compensation plan, but the income disclosure statement. Talk to people who have been in it or maybe who have left, and just take your time, like really think about it. Because I joined on an impulse.
Yeah.
The person was my friend and I trusted them and it fit all the things at the moment. So it's hard because if somebody's going to say yes, they're probably just going to say yes. But, my hope is that the MLM world will just crumble. I think it's super unethical in so many ways. So it's hard for me to say like, well, just, consider these things. It's like, please just don't.
I'm glad that we're clarifying. Like, I'm not saying like, hey, what should people consider before they join an MLM?
Sure.
I'm saying, how do they know that it's an MLM? Because I think, I've almost joined them before without realizing it until later, like, oh, that's what that was.
Oh yeah. And in Portland, we had the gifting circle going around, which is a straight up Ponzi scheme. So yeah, I almost did one of those because again, like good people were anyway.
Yeah, I was invited into one of those as well. And honestly, I probably would have done it in the moment because the person who was telling me about it was somebody I really trusted, but I didn't have the money.
Right.
So that's, I think the thing is like what you're saying, push the pause button and go find out what it is that you're potentially getting to.
But it is hard if you don't even know the question to ask. I did not even realize what an MLM was when I joined, really. Like I had an idea, but I didn't really know. So, I suppose just find out. Is it a multi-level
Straight
marketing?
up ask. Yeah.
If you know that word now, multi-level marketing, ask, is this an MLM or is this a network marketing company?
And you'll watch people maybe who have been coached to dance around the answer to that. And so pay attention to that, right? Like when they're sort of like answering you, but not quite answering you, like, well, some people say, but it's not really like that was kind of how it was in organizations I run. It's like, no, it's not really culty, like at all. Like you can feel when somebody sort of has that cognitive dissonance as they're responding to you. So maybe we can encourage people to pay attention to that, like listen for that.
I think that would be a very likely response. Or there's sort of the other thing, like really own it and are just like multi-level marketing. It's awesome, and like talk about why it's great.
Yeah.
But there are all these false promises basically that they're talking about. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I mean, there's just so many places we could go with this conversation. And it means a lot to me that you were willing to come onto the podcast and talk about these kinds of influences, which I think is really important for people to hear that specificity, because there's so many MLMs in disguise out there. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful that you're willing to share your story. And I know that this conversation is just the beginning. We're going to keep learning and communicating in the social media ethers and otherwise, and just stay connected around this, because there's so much still coming to light we can keep sharing with each other. So I'll share your information so that people can find you in the show notes for sure. And I'm just super grateful that our paths intersected, although I'm a little bummed it was because of this.
I know, but it was nice to, think about how we met and how our paths have kind of intersected over the years. And had a really fun memory of like doing a meditation group with you at one point. It was like, remember the Oprah?
Oh my gosh. The New Earth or whatever it was.
Yeah, but it was great. You know what?
Yeah.
It was good.
We were all in on that stuff back then.
Oh yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. That's so funny. Thanks for reminding me of that.
Yeah. But I always just enjoyed your work and your approach, and it's always felt really grounded, even in the midst of the environment of new age thought.
That's really nice to hear. Yeah. I had the same experience with you, actually. This is maybe the destination we were moving toward all along. It's just, that's how we learn and grow, right?
Yep. Trying it on.
I want to thank Jamie for joining me this week, for being so generous with her story, and for giving us so many insights into the red flags to look out for when it comes to multi-level marketing. I'll be back next week with a hard-hitting conversation that you won't want to miss. Until then, please consider rating or reviewing the podcast on your favorite streaming app. And also, check things out over on Patreon. You can join us there for as little as $1 a month. And Tracy and I just dropped another episode of Deconstructing Dogma, one that's really going to speak to former members of the org or anyone who's waking up from the indoctrination of New Age wellness culture. You can access the bonus episode along with other extras at patreon.com/The Deeper Pulse. Special thanks to those who've already joined us there. Your donations are what make this work possible. And to everyone out there, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next week. Ciao.